The courage for experimentation beyond the dogma of his time and the limitations of Baroque style distinguished Johann Sebastian Bach from most of his contemporaries who composed music during his historic period. In fact, his ingenuity is emblematic of the approach of today's jazz musicians, including improvisatory nature of many of his compositions, his unconventional treatment of harmonic colors, his innovative employment of tonal development and modulation through expanded amount of keys, among other modern composition techniques. And the new ebook by Rosalina Gutman, Paradox of Invisible Dissonance in Fugue Parody by J.S. Bach, showcases one of such examples that is certain to surprise even well familiar with Bach's music, jazz, and contemporary music buffs. Dissonant sonorities employed by rebel composer in bold defiance of the ban by dogma, dominant over the minds of musicians of his historical period. However, one of the key focuses of this publication is on their paradoxical invisibility and the significant discrepancies of most analysis publications and acclaimed recordings with the score facts related to dissonant sonorities, and they are commonly used as didactic aids for Bach's interpretation that had been missing the mere mention, hard-to-miss jazzy cluster chords and devil's intervals, in bold defiance of the dogmatic rules that made their use as unappealing as only possible. Their appearance should be hard to miss even in jazz and modern music. But Bach made a point to attract a lot of attention were sonic surprises by adding additional emphasis by employing dissonance with no resolution and adding extra rhythmic and dynamic stress with syncopation that further emboldened clashing effect. Of course, once these bursts of dissonant clashes are identified with scaffolding, these self-evident score facts need no proof with any archival records. And no longer hidden in plain sight, Bach's bold innovation is similarly obvious and indisputable. The ebook points to the key solution for this puzzle of perceptual phenomenon of staggering widespread collective blind spot, ruled by the concepts of social influences that were illuminated at the new depth thanks to embodiment through this fugue. Readers are guided through the piece with analysis with the special glance of piano instructor, revealing its didactic aims for teaching Bach students to use nuanced dynamics of newly emerging during his time fortepiano. In fact, without bold dynamics accents for syncopated cluster chords, their clashing sonority is lost. But false educational standard that enforced today's use of historical average of zombification during Bach's time, forced to normalize among many musicians the hazardous for health emotional repression. And this entrained childhood habit for avoiding nuanced dynamics that confined millions of performers of Bach's music caused their collective cognitive failure to grasp elemental facts of notation. Readers will enjoy laughing along with composer and making mockery of dogma in Liberated from Distortion Approach, Fugue Parody. And this experiential evidence reveal the lack of relevance of Bach's undeniable bold innovations to the average stereotypical rules of his historical period that encouraged emotional detachment in music. Unearthed from oblivion, emboldened jazzy dissonant sonorities restored the true meaning of parody of this fugue, while also providing undeniable evidence for Liberated of the entire legacy of Bach from the significant mischaracterization. Most of students of Bach scores and fans of his outstanding genius are in for many more surprises related to the creation of this fugue. It is linked directly to the very traumatic events in the life of composer that had been also obscured by the tradition of politically correct biographical distortions, paradoxically avoiding the bitter truth about Bach's life, subjected to many limitations of prisoner of conscience at unbearable price for humanity. Contrary, in the interest of fairness, every biography of the composer has to stress that Bach committed no crime, but instead he became the victim of notorious crime of false and retaliatory imprisonment with the deliberate purpose of the skillful character assassination. This scam led to the lifelong witch hunt, aiming to blemish the good name of genius musician, whose prolific music didn't fit the stereotypes that supported the ruling regime of monarchy. No, by all means, Bach did not deserve to suffer from such human rights violations. But this outstanding musician had no funds to afford legal defense, just like most of his impoverished colleagues, musicians of past and present, who had been marginalized and devalued by unchanged tradition of persecuting profession of musician by institutionalized and normalized abuse. This attempt to disparage in the eyes of the public this outstanding consciousness transformer was due to the fear of his measurable capacity to use music in order to propel social change. Bach's strive to employ emotionally resonant music to counterpoint detachment from reality on subliminal level of zombification brought significant cognitive advancement. Like any hands-on music instructor, he could witness such impact of music-based reawakening in his students. But such emotional reawakening among his audience was capable of stirring up the awareness about suffering from systemic injustice of the ruling regime and its power institutes, shaking and threatening convenient for the wealthy elite's status quo. And their resentment to the change turned into the nasty form of mischaracterization of this advocate for humanity by concocting false accusations to portray him as the criminal. Their limited minds could not grasp one of the kind opportunity to advance their consciousness with the help of Bach's uniquely designed music. However, even more paradoxical is the remaining today strive to confine the music of Bach and its performers by emotional repression. In this context, Fugue Parody by Bach presents masterfully, notated by him, invitation to students of his scores to show their camaraderie with rebel composer by joining his laughter to scorn those stubborn scholars of his music, whose resentment to change is combined with the entitlement to force this giant of musical intellect into their own Lilliputian standards for oversimplification of his polyphony's complex beauty, while robbing it off its full spectrum of transformative power. Liberated truth in Bach's Fugue Parody is evident of the widespread acceptance of cognitively dissonant standard for hazardous, historically informed performance that is irrelevant to Bach. It lasted due to manipulation of public opinion by the tradition of politically correct biographical distortions, while contradicting with Bach's own proactive efforts to help avoiding zombification, witnessed by the readers in this tiny polyphonic maverick of didactic scaffolding. Readers can observe the sobering fact: millions of musicians deserve better than suffering from evident cognitive failures in reading notation as the result of cognitive paralysis caused by emotional repression. And Bach's tool to counterpoint with musical humor these damaging impacts of imposed zombification on millions of students of Bach's scores during their childhood is a must to use for emotional liberation. In the face of current crisis with nuanced emotional expression among music education field, made evident by sobering yet essential lesson from Bach, music instructors face the task to reaffirm their ability to regain lost aptitude for grasping score facts in Bach's didactic compositions. And the symbolic of camaraderie laughter can ease overcoming of related ethical confusion among the inept leaders in the field. That is why more and more music educators are eager to demonstrate adherence to the professional ethics to pursue restored truth in teaching Bach's legacy. Bach's colleagues, music educators, deserve for their voices to be heard. And their participation and initiation of the worldwide college discourse on these critical for every musician subjects allows for the true intellectual leaders to shine the light through the self-defeat of moral atrocity culture and resulting from it material manifestation of fast-approaching, self-defeating, anthropogenic global threats to humanity. Share Bach's call for camaraderie, laughter at the moral atrocity culture that remains emblematic and crucial today, like never before.